I know it's an older PC game meant for an x86 platform, but to see it running on an Android device over 100 FPS is pretty impressive. So yeah, I'd say it can definitely run Crysis. What's going on, everybody? It's etaprime back here again. Today I am super excited because we finally get to take a look at the AYN Odin2 Portal. This is one that I've been waiting on for a little while now, and they did run an Indiegogo. I believe they raised over $1 million for this thing. On their website, you can actually pre-order it right now, and they offer 3 different models. They've got the Base, Pro, and Max. I've got the Max model here, which just offers more RAM and storage, but all 3 variants do have the same CPU. So when it comes down to it, you will see the same performance across the board. So first things first, main difference between the Odin 2 and the Odin 2 Portal is going to be the form factor and the screen. This is a super sleek device, and it does feel a lot larger than other Android devices on the market, and that's because we've got a 7-inch display. When it comes to this screen, it's actually a 120Hz AMOLED display. It looks beautiful, and I'll tell you right now I've got it set to 30% brightness because if I jack this up to 100% while filming the screen, it kind of blows everything out, given the fact that this does up to 800 nits of brightness. And for an Android handheld, yeah, that's pretty bright compared to others on the market. Around back here, we've got our vent system because this does use an active cooler to keep everything nice and chilly. We've also got 2 programmable macro keys, and this does support a micro SD card. Personally, I like what they've done here with the design, and ergonomics are great. This thing just kind of hugs your palm, and it's a very thin device, only coming in at 11.2 millimeters thick. Up top here, we've got our power button, volume rocker, exhaust vent, and obviously we've got our shoulder buttons and triggers. The whole device does look pretty nice, and obviously I've got the black version here. When you're holding it, you can reach all of the triggers and buttons without an issue, and the D-pad actually feels pretty decent. We will be doing some testing by the end. But yeah, I really do like the way it feels in the hand, and I mentioned it feels like a larger device. I mean, it's still a smaller device when you compare it to x86 handhelds like the Steam Deck here. As you can see, the Steam Deck OLED comes in much larger. It basically dwarfs the Odin 2 Portal. And another one I have here is the ROG Ally X. And this is a pretty good comparison here because they do have the same screen size, coming in at 7 inches. They're both 1080p, but obviously the ROG Ally X is coming in larger. And to give you an idea of how thin this thing is, you can see it compared right here, only 11.2 millimeters thick. And when it comes to the overall specs of the Odin 2 Portal, it's actually using the same CPU as the Odin 2 and the Odin 2 Mini. We've got the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. Again, we've got active cooling, so we can keep those clocks up, and on that big X3 core, it does go up to 3.2 gigahertz. GPU is the Adreno 740, and they're offering 3 different models, so they've got the Base, the Pro, and Max, so 8 gigs and 128 gigabytes of internal storage, 12 gigs of RAM and 512 gigabytes of storage, or 16 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of internal storage, but all 3 of these do support a micro SD card. And I've got the Max here, but that 12 gig would be more than enough across the board. All of them also have that 120Hz 1080p OLED display, 0 bezels, 800 nits of brightness, and 155% sRGB. So it is oversaturated, and because it's an OLED, it does look really good. Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 5.3, 8,000 mAh battery with 27 watt quick charge capabilities, and it's running Android 13 out of the box. I definitely want to move in a bit closer and give you a look at all the software we have built in here with the Odin 2 Portal, and this does support video over USB Type-C. We'll take a look at the supported resolutions in just a bit, but overall, I mean, we've got Android here. Pulling down from the top, we can access our quick menu. We've got our performance mode, standard, performance, high performance, and if you look over here, our fan will automatically change. If we go to performance, it's just going to go to quiet. High performance is going to go to sport, and in high performance mode, basically what this does is take the clocks up all the way on the CPU and the GPU. I've been really messing around in performance mode when gaming. I personally haven't noticed a huge jump between performance and high performance, but yeah, I mean, we could probably squeeze a bit more in high performance mode. Display, 120, 60 on the built-in AMOLED. Fan, quiet, smart, sport, and it's actually not as loud as I thought it would be. Sometimes with these handheld devices in sport mode, it can get a bit buzzy or a bit whiny. This one's definitely not as loud as some others that we've tested, but smart mode seems to work pretty good. It will ramp up when it needs it. Controller style, I stick to the Xbox style, but you can go with Odin, which will be Japanese layout. L2, R2 mode, analog, digital, or both. Joystick LED, We can disable it, turn it on, and right here, we've actually got full control over both. So we've got both left, right. We can control the brightness, saturation, and color over both of the analog sticks. Charging separation. Whenever I've got this plugged in for a long period of time, I usually just leave this on. Basically, it's not going to hit up the battery, so it will save the battery's lifespan, and overall heat in the unit can be decreased because we're not charging the battery at the same time. Moving over here, we've got the basics: screen recorder, auto rotate, screenshot, and so on and so on. We can force landscape mode. But there's more settings here. If we go into our main settings and move down to our Odin settings, vibration strength, charging LED indicator can be disabled. And like I mentioned, it does support video over USB Type-C. 4K 60, 2.5K 144, 1080 60, 1080 120, 1080 240. So we can get on up there, and 4K 60 does look phenomenal, but my game capture just isn't picking it up. Just kind of a weird thing with my game capture device. Turn off handheld console screen. And for this, if you're going to be plugged into HDMI for a long period of time, I would suggest this because we've got that OLED and OLEDs can burn in. No auto sleep. Select sound output when connected to DisplayPort. Turn on USB connection notification. Controller style, we've already taken a look at that L2, R2 mode. Rear keys can be mapped from here. So we can set it up as a home button, select, start, A, B, X, Y, L1, L2. Right across the board there, so they are fully mappable, those two keys on the rear. Joystick calibration, gamepad test. Enable virtual mouse. Now, the first time you do this, you will have to set up a hotkey. So for me, I usually just do L3 and R3 at the same time, and we can set it up just like that. That way, when we hit those hotkeys, we've got a virtual mouse that we can control with our analog stick. Controller mapping, totally remap all the buttons here. Speed adjustment, Google services, virtual RAM swap. I personally don't like using this because internal storage is going to be a lot slower than real RAM. But let's say you've got the base model. This could come in handy adding a couple extra gigs. We can disable apps, app auto launch manage, whitelist application. We can go right back to the setup wizard. So yeah, I mean, everything we need in a handheld is here in the Odin settings. And of course, we've also got all of the Android settings. There's one last thing I want to show you here, and that's the extra Odin launcher. Now, what we've got right now is just basically stock Android launcher. You can go into Google Play or you can sideload any launcher you want. If you want to go with an emulation front end, not a problem to do so, but we've also got the option to use the Odin launcher. Down here, we've got Odin settings. Basically, everything we took a look at is accessible from the Odin launcher. Layout. We can change the wallpaper, and we can always add more apps. So I'm going to go with these here, and we've added them. Over on the left-hand or the right-hand side, performance, joystick light. You can separate these from entertainment, productivity, system apps. I mean, we've seen the Odin launcher on their other handhelds. It is a bit lackluster when you compare it to others or some that you can get for free over on Google Play, but it's nice that we have something else pre-installed. Now I wanted to move over to some benchmarks, and I wanted to compare this against the S24 Ultra because that's a device people would have in their pocket. You can always pick up a cheap controller and turn it into a handheld. After all, they're both Android devices. But the S24 Ultra has that Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, which is coming in a bit more powerful. And with these benchmarks, keep in mind that the S24 Ultra does not have active cooling. Adding active cooling to the back of the thing can net you better performance, but when it comes to Geekbench 6, on the Odin2 Portal, single core 2074, on the S24 Ultra 2166, so we're not that far off. And on the Odin 2, we're in high performance mode with the cooling fan turned on. Multi 5757, on the S24 Ultra with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, 6927. Next up, 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme, a GPU benchmark, on the Odin 2 Portal 3739. S24 Ultra coming in with 4,942. And yeah, this is where the real difference is between the Gen 2 and the Gen 3. That GPU does offer much better performance. And the final one we have here is Antutu. On the Odin 2, we scored a 1,602,094. On the S24 Ultra, 1,787,000. And if you take a look down the list, yeah, obviously the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 did come ahead in all of these tests here. But personally, I thought it would be a much bigger margin. Really comes down to that Odin 2 Portal having that performance mode, allowing those clocks to stay on up there on the GPU and CPU, plus active cooling, so it's not going to thermal throttle. Now, I want to test out some gaming, and this first one here is going to run on anything. We've got Minecraft. I really use this to show off the on-screen overlay that we have here. So anytime you're playing a game, if you swipe from the right-hand side, it's going to bring up an in-game menu. There's a key mapper, you can record the screen, go to Do Not Disturb mode, you can even stream from this application. But my favorite thing here is the on-screen FPS counter. We can just put it right on screen, it's going to give us a real-time FPS. And since we've got a 120Hz display, Minecraft does run at 120Hz. Moving over to something a bit harder to run, we've got Genshin Impact, high settings 60 FPS, on-screen FPS counter right there in the middle. And usually on Android, we can only use the touch screen, but we've got that built-in key mapper, which is really easy to set up. So even with the analog sticks, we've got a few different modes that we can use. I'm in view mode with this game because we want that right analog stick to work for our camera. And we can rearrange these buttons on screen any way we like. This comes in really handy for games just like this that don't natively support controllers on Android. I really wish they would have added controller support here, but I guess it's only on iOS right now because they probably do make more money over there and spend more time on development. But when it comes to running native Android games on the Odin 2 Portal, we've got plenty of power here. I mean, basically anything from the store you can go up to high or maximum. With this right now, I'm at high settings 60 because at maximum I did get a few dips under 60, but at high this still looks really good on this AMOLED display. The next one I wanted to test is Fortnite, and it's not on Google Play. You will have to download the Epic Launcher. But with this, in the past, on Android handhelds like this, we've really never been able to take it up to that 90 FPS mark, mainly because a lot of those handhelds, I guess, aren't whitelisted, so we're usually at 30 FPS. But with the Odin 2 Portal right out of the box, I was able to go up to 90 FPS in the game. We're at high 90, and it runs absolutely amazingly. I didn't have to do any controller mapping or anything like that. The built-in controls just worked with this game. Now it's time to move over to some emulation, and I wanted to test out this D-pad here. We've got Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I'm using the Redream emulator, and the D-pad feels great for fighting games. I was really surprised because I'm not a huge fan of these dome switch D-pads. It does remind me of the Retroid Pocket 4's D-pad, just a little taller, and it might be a bit bigger than the Retroid Pocket 4's, but overall, the feel, roll, and execution is excellent with this thing. Checking out some PSP emulation using PPSSPP, 4x resolution, so we're at a native 1080p with this display, and we could take it up even further. Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, with most of the stuff you can do 6x resolution, but since we've only got a 1080p display, it looks great like this running at full speed. Next up, some Gamecube using the Dolphin emulator. Automodalista, 720p OpenGL backend, since we've got a Snapdragon chip, running at a constant 60. We've seen the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 time and time again with emulation. We know what it can do, we know what it can't do, and with the higher end emulators, there is some stuff that it might struggle with, but for the most part, I mean, this is a really good chipset to work with inside of a handheld gaming machine like this. And finally, PS2 using Nether SX2, we're at 2x resolution with Ratchet & Clank. Runs great, and this is one of those games and emulators where it kind of fluctuates between 30 and 60, but overall it was a really nice experience at 2x resolution, and I do think we could probably take this up to 2.5x if you really wanted to. The final thing I wanted to show off here was some PC game emulation using WInlator. This is the official version of WInlator. It's the latest version as of making this. I think it's 8.0 right now over on the GitHub page. If you're not familiar, basically what we've got is an x86 emulator for Android. I've got Fallout 4 and Crysis here. Go ahead and start up Fallout 4. I'm at low settings, 720p on this device. Does take a second for everything to boot up here, but it will get right into the game. And we've got our FPS counter up in the top left-hand corner. It won't run exactly at full speed with the official version. There are modified versions out there like WInlator Frost, which might offer a little better performance. I did test that, but with Crysis, I had a bunch of graphical issues. Fallout 4 did run better on that, but I had to swap back to this one because I couldn't fix those issues with Crysis. And this isn't streaming from a PC, this is not cloud gaming. This is actually emulating an x86 game on an ARM device. I know it's a bit hard to see the FPS counter up in the top left-hand corner, but for the most part, we're around 41, 42 FPS. Got some dips when there's lots of characters on screen, particle effects going on. And with the modified version, I've actually been able to get this up to around 52 on average on the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. I've got a lot of PC games that do boot up and run pretty well on this, so in my full review, we will take a look at a few more. But the last one I wanted to take a look at was Crysis. This is not Crysis Remastered, this is the original Crysis. And right now I'm at 720p medium settings. At medium settings, 720, we're seeing an average of around 73 FPS. At low settings, we can get over 100 with this game on an Android device like this. Because after all, this game was never meant to be run on an ARM device. It's emulating an x86 device running this game at full speed. First impressions, I love the overall form factor. I think the design is really nice, fits right in the hand. The screen is absolutely beautiful. Buttons feel great, analog sticks work just fine, and that D-pad is spot on. If they would have changed one thing on this, in my opinion, it would have been the CPU. I was really hoping for the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 just to get a little more out of that GPU. Definitely not a slouch with the 8 Gen 2, but given that they've released two other devices or two other Odin 2s with the same chip, I do think it was kind of time for an upgrade. I guess they might be saving that for the Odin 3 if that ever comes to fruition. But I think for what we have here, they did a bang-up job on the Odin 2 Portal. The Indiegogo has ended, but over on their website, you can still buy this, and they're offering 3 different color variants: black, indigo, and white. Personally, I like that white version. And when it comes to pricing, these go anywhere from $329 to $499 depending on the version. So the base is going to be that $329, 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigabytes of storage, up to $499 with their max version, 16 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. So it does seem a bit steep for that higher end model, especially given all the x86 handhelds on the market right now. But in the end, it's really up to you. If you're interested in learning a little more, I will leave links in the description. And I will have my full review coming up soon, but that's going to wrap it up for this first look at the Odin 2 Portal. If you've got any questions or if there's anything else you want to see tested on this device, let me know in the comments below. And like always, thanks for watching.